Hello and welcome to Wildly Curious, a podcast that tells you everything you need to know about nature, and probably more than you wanted to know. I'm Laura.
And I'm Katy, and we are going to today continue the Bog Chronicles. I don't know what else to call it.
Just bog. I feel like there needs to be some. It was Cave Chronicles.
I know.
Bog.
Books.
Banter. Bog banter.
There we go. Bog banter. I was like,
Start beatboxing.
Yeah, right. Bog banter. So we're just talking about, just like we did for the Cave Chronicles, where we just talked about cool things found in caves. We're just talking about weird things found in bogs.
And if you're wondering what a bog is, listen to last week's episode where Katy and Luke dive into what is a bog and what makes them special, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Pretty easy stuff. Well, Laura, do you want to go first then? So we're just going to go, Laura's going to do this week again. These are mini-sodes in between last season and then next season, which will start up in January. So these will just be really, really quick little short ones. So Laura will do this week, I'll do next week, and then we'll alternate just like we did for the Cave Chronicles.
Yes. Okay. We can preface this with, like Katy was saying last week, bogs preserve basically whatever you put into them. Knowing that, I want to talk about the Clath Halan bodies.
Ooh, bodies.
Yeah. Bodies. Man, I just love a good body story now.
Good bog body story.
Good bog body story. Okay, so where does this tale take place? South Uist in the Outer Hebrides, which is off the west coast of Scotland. So as maybe you said last week, Katy, there's a lot of bogs over in Great Britain.
Yeah.
It's just the type of the environment that there is. But these Outer Hebrides are islands. And they found this at an archaeological site with 4 Bronze Age roundhouses that were discovered in 2001. And the site is about 3,000 years old, with people living there from between 2000 BC to 1300 AD.
Okay.
All right, so set the stage. Now, the bodies. They found 2 bodies under the floor of the house, 1 man and 1 woman. The soil under the house, though, it was like basically almost on a beach, so the sand was super, super sandy, which would absolutely not have preserved these bodies. So they were like perfectly intact. So they looked mummified. So they started diving in and tried to figure out what was going on with these bodies. So the man, they think after radiocarbon dating, was from 1500 BC, and the woman was from 1300 BC. Now, everything about this story is weird and cool, and I'm actually going to leave you with way more questions than answers,
Good.
Which really sucks. This is one of those at the end of when you go up to heaven and you're like, God, I have questions. One of these is now going to be this.
God, I have questions about these bodies that were found.
About these bodies. I need to know.
Yeah.
My questions are like Easter Island, Roanoke Island, and now it's going to be the Clath Halan bodies.
Yeah.
So the woman... Both of these bodies were in the fetal position intact. The woman was in the fetal position and cursory, intact woman because of the pelvis that they could see. And she was holding 2 of her teeth, 1 in each hand.
Interesting.
So I think it was her incisors, the left one in her left hand, the right one in her right hand. All right, weird.
Yeah.
And then the man also was in the fetal position, also appeared to be intact. But then they started
Wait,
noticing
was he holding his teeth?
No, he was not.
Okay. Because I was like,
but way weirder than that.
Okay.
Way weirder than that. They started really looking at him and putting some stuff together. And they found out it wasn't just him. It was 3 people stitched together.
Ah.
Yeah. So, yes. So it was, the skull was 1 person, the torso and limbs were the other person, and the jaw was a 3rd person. All had died within 150 years of each other. So maybe not even at the same time, but within 150 years, stitched them together. All right. And then they were like, oh, geez, maybe we should look at the woman a little bit closer. She's also a Frankenstein. So they went back, they analyzed her. Her pelvis is clearly female, but the skull of a man, the skull and mandibles of a man, and she's at least 2 people, maybe more. It was a little hard to read what they were saying in the article.
So her incisors were man incisors.
Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah. She was holding, her pelvis was female, but the skull was male, meaning that the teeth, because, the teeth were missing from the skull. I don't know.
So that then means that, at least in that case, if she was holding the teeth, like, they had to have done that skull and all at the same time.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
Then they were like, holy crap. Okay, what is the actual timeline of things that happened here?
Yeah.
Because nothing is the same. Okay. So they can tell a lot of stuff from an archaeological site by dating different pieces.
Yeah.
By dating the ashes and cinders and ground up stuff in the floor of this house, they could tell that the house was 3,000 years old, but the bodies were at least 200 through 300 years older than that. They died before the house. Like, the burial thing happened later. That was the last thing to happen. The first thing that probably happened was whatever happened with this man being put together, and then the woman later. But by looking at the bodies and things, not only were they different and stitched together, they definitely found from the evidence that they saw, they had, in order to be preserved like this, they would have had to have gone through some kind of mummification process. And the only way for that to happen anywhere like that, and with the chemicals and debris that they found in a bog. But very specifically, it's not just like these people fell into a bog. They were placed into a bog and then removed, because there is a timeline for being in a bog. Between 6 and 18 months, you have to be in there. It stops decomposition.
Yeah.
It tans the skin and the sinew. But any longer than 18 months, and the bones start to be replaced with minerals. And that had not happened. So placed in, mummified, pulled out. That would then leave you with an intact mummy that you could leave out in the elements. So they think, and also by looking and seeing like the wear and tear on these bodies, that they had clearly been out and most likely on display or something like that.
Display of
for
some
200 to 300 years.
Can you imagine, though, being like the person who figured that out if we just put them in this bog for 6 months to a year?
Yeah, not too long.
Yeah, ta-da!
It's like a fine process. Yeah, like a
yeah.
So they were out in the elements for at least a couple hundred years before finally being buried under this house. Truly, that's it. That's all I know, because there's nothing else to know. So the questions are, who were they? There's speculation that clearly these people were someone important. Probably.
Multiple people of importance.
Multiple important people, right? And due to similarities in other cultures and things like that, they were like, okay, maybe this was something like, okay, why being stitched together? Perhaps, this is a long shot, but this is what it said in the article, not what I'm thinking.
Okay.
It said perhaps it was a way to merge ancestries into one lineage. Okay. So you're like combining all your ancestors into one, and then you would then they could be consulted for important decisions.
I see.
So
I go
I
too
guess,
sciencey down the route of maybe they just had 3 dead bodies, stitching them together to be like, let's see what happens. Like, like do different
just
people?
An ADHD person?
Yeah, just do different. That was so an ADHD person. I wonder what would happen if these 3. Let's take these 3 different dead bodies that I have, or like do different people from different ethnic
or imagine
background.
Like how much we could mess with people of the future by doing something
right,
like this.
Right. But also like, okay, so do different people of different ethnic backgrounds decompose differently? You know what I mean? Because they wouldn't know back then.
Oh yeah, no, they wouldn't know. And I mean, I'm sure they're all obviously the same peoples.
Yes.
Like they're these same tribe, same culture.
But back then, though, you know how much it was like one family versus another, and like my family's better than your family kind of thing.
Well, right? Maybe this was a way to overcome some weird family feuds or something. Yeah. You're like, you know what? We can't make these marriage alliances work, so instead we'll just stitch you together once you're dead.
Right. Like, it's like a marriage quilt, but like way weirder.
Marriage quilt.
Just with bodies.
But just with dead bodies. But then your family has to get along because obviously your ancestors are now intertwined with each other.
Right? Yeah.
Like, and then why were they eventually buried under this particular house together? Yeah. Like, what does that have to do with anything? Maybe there's also like, I mean, I found just an article later that referenced Christianity in this island. I wonder, then did finally somebody was like, we should bury these
We
people.
should probably bury these people, yeah.
Yeah.
They've been on display for the last few hundred years. It's time that they can go to heaven and just have some peace. Yeah, maybe.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So who knows? Who knows? Many, many questions, but so cool.
Yeah.
Stitched together human body. Talk about an archaeologist's dream.
Yeah.
Like,
I wouldn't even know where to begin to start asking questions about that one. Once I figured out it was different people together, I'd be like, well, don't know.
It would keep me awake for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
If I was the archaeologist who found it.
Oh
I'd be
my
like,
goodness.
I need to know.
Yeah. So bizarre. Well, that was a great one. Alrighty. Well, next week then, I'm going to also talk about just a singular one body of one person. So
okay.
So until then, guys, make sure you go check us out on Patreon and support us there. It would greatly help us to keep bringing content. Again, like we said, the new season will start in January. Until then,
for the holidays,
after
bodies and bogs.
Bodies and bogs. What a light-hearted holiday conversation. Bringing people together.
For the holidays. Oh, that one needs to be drawn. Somebody needs to do some fan art of that one.
Oh, so gross. All right, guys. Talk to you next week.
Bye.